Hi, I'm attorney Greg Dell here with attorney Stephen Jessup. And Steve, today we're going to talk about a super important topic, I think, which is how to get approved benefits with Prudential Disability Insurance Company, whether it's short-term or long-term disability. And the reason I think that this topic is so important is because the application for disability insurance benefits is the foundation of the entire claim. Meaning when a person calls us and says, oh, I already applied, we can't undo that.
Yeah.
But when a person calls us weeks, months, or a year beforehand, then we can set the stage. And I want to hand it off to you when I say we can set the stage or paint the story and what that means and why it's important when a claimant's applying for disability insurance benefits with Prudential.
You know, the reason why it's so important is, more than likely, I would say almost certainly you receive this policy through your employer. It's going to be governed by certain laws, and under the law ERISA, your whole file is going to be based on your paper documentation. So the documents in your claim, whether it be your medical information, work information, all that stuff, it is so important that is presented properly to the insurance company because you only get one chance to make a first impression with them. You get the application in. If sometimes people offer too much information. They don't offer enough information. They don't have proper medical treatment or a doctor supporting them. By the time we can get involved, all that negative information is already there, and it's already skewed how Prudential is going to review your claim and look at it going into the future. So getting ahead of the game, unless you have a catastrophic injury where it's pretty clear cut that you're going to need to be out of work. But say, you've had nagging back issues or, some health issues for a while, and you've been thinking, hey, I don't know if I can keep working. It's getting harder to work. You want to set this stage to be able to tell a story properly to the insurance company. It's not that you're making something up. It's that you are making sure your doctor's documenting the problems that you're having at work because of the condition, that you've tried different types of treatment. You've seen specialists if that's available to show that you're doing everything you can. You don't want to file disability. No one wants to file disability. And you want your records to reflect that you've tried everything. Because an insurance company will also always argue, as if you've had a medical problem for a while and then all of a sudden you file, they'll say, well, what changed? You've been able to work with this condition, so what's changed that now you can't? So being able to control the narrative of your medical information and how it's impacting your ability to work is priceless and increases the chances of success in applying for benefits tenfold.
Okay, so that was a good summary and basically gave us the foundation that this is all about preparation and support. But now I want to back up and go through like a step-by-step process, the way that we would look at this claim if we got it. And it all starts with the policy. But step one we always do is a pre-existing condition evaluation. Explain what that is and why you do that.
So it's funny, a lot of people say, oh, I thought pre-existing conditions aren't a thing anymore. Well, that's with health insurance. Disability insurance is completely different. A standard disability pre-existing condition limitation will say if you've been covered under the policy for less than 12 months and you file a claim for disability, it'll trigger a pre-existing condition review. And in that pre-existing condition review, they'll look, it's usually about 3 months, sometimes out to 6 months, but 3 months is common, 90 days before your effective date of coverage. If you treated for the medical condition that you are now filing for disability on, it's going to be deemed pre-existing and they're going to deny the claim. So you want to make sure that, best case scenario, that you've been covered for over a year before you file. This is obviously built in by the insurance industry to prevent people from basically getting a job to be able to file disability right away. So one, knowing how long you've been covered and making sure that that pre-existing condition language is the standard 12 months. Sometimes it is 24 months you have to be covered before you can file. So understanding if you're going to fall into that trap.
So it makes sense that they have that, but it is a very hard and fast rule where we've seen people who are at 364 days, it's crazy. Like that tight of a deadline where you didn't make it that 366 days because you actually got to get past the 1 year. The second most important step for me that I'd like you to discuss is understanding the definition of disability. And from handling, we've literally reviewed thousands of Prudential disability claims. They're one of the top 3 biggest group disability insurance companies in the world. And what are the types of definitions of disability that we usually see in these Prudential policies?
I'd say the standard one is going to be a 24-month period where they're going to look at the inability to perform your own occupation. After that, it's this idea, can you perform any gainful occupation? It's based upon your training, education, and experience. Within each of those categories, depending on the type of coverage your employer provides, there can be an income component too, like unable to earn 60% or 80%. But one of the important things is understanding too, when they're going to look at this own occupation, your job. People think that means the insurance company is going to look exactly how you perform your job, but the policy is going to have this national economy standard, which basically means that your occupation is how it's performed generally in the national economy, not how it's performed for your employer or even at the specific location. Because you may work in an area where the job's done differently. It doesn't matter. It's this generic idea of what your job duties are. So knowing, are you going to be covered for any period of own occupation? How are they going to determine what your occupation is? And then if it is something that's going to be very long-term, this idea of any occupation and setting your claim up from the get-go to get to that point as well.
Okay, so we've done our pre-existing condition evaluation. We understand what the definition of disability is, and then this idea of determining how do we choose a date of disability, and is that important?
It is important. Again, barring a catastrophic, medical issue or injury, choosing a date of disability is very important. Like going back to what I said, insurance company, obviously if you've had the condition for a while, they're going to want to know, well, what changed? Ideally, you want to see a visit with a doctor and an updated medical note about things getting worse, getting harder, just before the date of disability. So then, the doctor makes a recommendation. I think maybe you should take some time away from work, file for disability, whatever the case may be, and going about it that way. So it tells a story that, you just didn't stop cold turkey. There was a rationale and a reason you're getting into the doctors, because a lot of people will file a claim and they haven't been to the doctors in a while.
Right.
So the insurance company goes, well, there's nothing that happened around this time that exacerbated the problem as to why you're going out now. Our doctors don't see why you couldn't do your job based on the medical information available. And there's also secondary concerns for a lot of people. If their medical condition's getting to a point where they're thinking about filing for disability, arguably it's affecting their ability to do their job. And sometimes they get concerned too, am I going to be fired before I can file because of this? So in those situations where there's a concern and things are in order, it can even be, if you've got sick time, just take a call on a sick day. Right. Use some vacation time. You don't need to let the employer know you're filing for disability right away, but that first day that you're out of work that we can say is due to the medical condition would be formulated into the date of disability.
Right. So the other important thing is that before we file a claim is, and I know we do this, we always have to review all of the available medical records. And to many people's surprise who call us after they've been denied, they've never looked at their own medical records. And doctors, they treat the patients, they don't treat the chart. Yeah. And they don't necessarily take great office notes. Yeah. And Prudential knows that. Yeah. So what does Prudential do about that? They eat you up. Mm-hmm. And they basically say, well, your doctor didn't document these complaints that you're telling us about now. Your doctor didn't give you particular pain medicine or something like that, or your doctor didn't do a range of motion evaluation of you, or your doctor didn't indicate 4 other things that you're telling us are wrong with you, like your cognitive difficulties, your short-term memory problems, your difficulty focusing as a result of pain. And then they say, well, it's not in the records. So that's when I'm handling a claim, I look at the records and go, I think we should wait at least another visit or 2 visits if you can hold on at work. Yeah. Because right now, I know how Prudential's trained, we know what their doctors look for, and they're going to deny you. So that's another very, very important thing, is to really understand those medical records, and then how we work with the claimants to educate them to communicate the importance of everything being in the medical records, so that, again, this story, the preparation, when Prudential gets the claim, how they're going to look at it and what it's going to look like on paper. Because we can say it over and over again, your claim's only as good as it is on paper. Now, the next thing is we choose our date of disability. Now we're going to notify the company. People want to know if it's a 180-day elimination period, should I notify them right away? Can I wait until day 150? What's your take on when you want to notify the company?
Usually you're going to have short-term disability. Right. And more often than not, Prudential is going to administer it, so they're going to be on notice. But say you don't. Say there's no short-term, or short-term's handled in-house by your employer or a separate third-party administrator. It's a balancing act because Prudential is going to have a period of time under the law to give you an answer. So if you put it too late, get the claim in like later towards the end of 180 days, you may wait, months before benefits are payable. Where if it's something you think you might be going out, getting it on the sooner side is better because things can be in range that if you get an approval before the end of the elimination period, as soon as that day clicks and they have to start paying you benefits, you're not going to miss the benefit there. So it really kind of depends. If Prudential's already handling the short term, generally they'll roll over to a long-term review, or you'll get contact from the long-term department. They'll require updated forms and information there. Don't assume that they're going to share information either. They should, ideally, a lot of times they do, but don't assume that they will. And I've heard people tell me, oh, well, they said I don't need to send these records because it's not pertinent to the time frame. I'm a believer that if you have any medical records that discusses your condition, you send them because your case will only ever be reviewed by what's in your file too.
Right. The other thing that I know Prudential's notorious for is running video surveillance. Yeah. And that's the trade-off, because as soon as you let them know something, they're going to start their video surveillance of you. Not that you're hiding anything, but they're on top of you, and then they're trying to look for inconsistencies, and it's been nonsense. I mean, going out to get garbage, and bringing in the garbage, and they go, well, you could bring the garbage cans in, or you walk the dog every day for 20 minutes, and they go, well, you can walk the dog. We don't know why you can't do your sedentary job, when totally different type tasks. So I prefer to keep them off the claimant's back if I can, but of course, like you said, it's going to take every bit of 60 to 90 days from when Prudential gets the application and gets everything they need before they make a decision.
And regardless of when the decision to notify them is, the most important thing too, regardless, is that you have everything ready. Copies of all your medical records, all the claim forms, stuff that we know they're going to want to see. Because if you just send claim forms, their time starts ticking, but they don't have all the information. Right. So they're not under any legal deadlines until you've provided them with all the, quote unquote, proof of loss. So we like to, as a whole packet, have all the medicals, everything there. So realistically, they should be able to, start that review right away.
Right. We never piecemeal anything. Yeah. We send everything from the claim forms, the financials, the medical records, employer statements, everything they need. So the next thing is you tell them you're applying, they send you these forms. Talk about the generic nature of the Prudential claim forms, because I think they're notorious, those forms.
Very much so. Unless you have a behavioral health condition, any type of mental health problem, that has its own specific questionnaire, which is still very general with it, because you could be suffering from major depression or paranoid schizophrenia. They're very different. But if it's a physical medical condition, which is a good number, the majority probably will be, it doesn't matter if it's a heart condition, a lower back problem, you have migraines, it's going to be the same form, and it's going to be geared with this idea of, can you do sedentary work? Can you do light? Can you do, medium? It really doesn't have any information, especially on the form for the doctor, the attending physician statement, for the doctor to really kind of elaborate what the problems are. And a lot of times, a lot of stuff isn't applicable. So the doctor writes not applicable, and the form almost looks barren because so much of it doesn't apply that it almost feels like when you look at it, it has this psychological visual effect that, well, it must be not bad. There's nothing written on this thing. So it's set up to, in my opinion, trap doctors into checking a box that they don't think is harmful to the client, to the patient, but Prudential will use to try to deny a claim.
Well, that's just the attending physician statement you were talking about, but then you also have the claimant statement, which, that's a form that they never give you enough space to talk about. What are your restrictions? What are your limitations? What was your job like? So, whenever we submit those, we always do an addendum.
Addendum to all that.
Which goes into great detail, answering all of these questions specific to what it is about your job or what it is about the difficulties that you're having. Because look, our goal is we want to get you approved out of the box. Yeah. We don't want you to be denied and have to go through this appeal process and possibly a lawsuit, because you will go months without getting paid if it's not done right. So addendums to the claimant statement are essential. And then of course they always send the educational background and vocational skills. And Prudential's goal, you have to understand, is it's all about return to work, especially if it's a short-term claim. And they actually have a book that's an occupational evaluation return to work based upon the type of injury. So their claims people say, if you have a carpal tunnel surgery, you should be back in 3 weeks. If you have a back surgery, you should be back to work in 12 weeks. So they kind of go through these things. Okay, you had a procedure. Not saying you have to have a procedure to be disabled, but if you do, these are the guidelines for how long a recovery should be. And the Prudential claim people are not sophisticated. No. I mean, you know, generally, they're not the level of these other companies where we see very well educated, we see sometimes attorneys, we see employees that have been with the company for 10 or 15 years doing disability claims. Prudential kind of throws their people to the wolves, gives them 100+ claims to handle, and they're just, you know, they're just going through the motions, but they don't really have the experience and skill necessary to properly evaluate a claim. So they look at the medical conditions, they look at a manual and say, well, your doctor gave you medicine, sent you to therapy, you should be fine. And you know, that gets me to talk about the quality of a Prudential denial letter, which goes to the quality of their review versus other companies when they're evaluating an initial claim if it's not presented to them in great detail.
You know, I usually say that it appears in a Prudential denial letter, the vast majority of the written language is just regurgitation of policy provisions. Yeah. You do get, like you said, that you know, the claims people are inundated with a lot of claims. You get the feeling that there's a lot of crossing T's, dotting I's. You know, they have a check boxes they have to go through in the process of their review. And a lot of times it's the least work to be done. On initial denial, they may not even have a doctor look. It may just be a nurse case manager, and they'll rely on that. Or maybe they'll send it to their medical director who works for them, and they'll agree with the nurse case manager. So it's the path of least resistance, because they don't want to put a lot of money in the review in the beginning, because like you said, it's about return to work. And psychologically speaking, if they deny a case, some people think, well, man, you know, maybe I'll just try to go back to work, and then that's that. It's when you file your appeals that they really will start to do more. The appeals department will do more. But you get the feeling like they're just missing the picture. Like they're just looking for certain things, and if something's not in the records like you mentioned, that's enough for them just to start that denial process. And with the amount of work that they have, it's almost this idea, not to you know, say that this is what happened, but you almost feel like, well, man, if I deny this, I get it off my desk, and appeals can get it right and get a real review. And in my opinion, that's what it's like.
Right. I don't see a lot of compassion. I don't see a real goal to say we're going to help someone. It's more about, let me get through this claim and get to the next one, because I have so many. I got to get this done. So, you know, there's so many different topics to discuss when it comes to applying, and especially every medical condition has its own nuances when it comes to handling the claim properly. The definition of disability is usually fairly similar, at least in the beginning, but these are all things that we'd love to discuss with you if you have a claim for long-term disability, and the process is really easy to work with any of our attorneys. We ask you to obtain a copy of your short-term and your long-term disability policy if you have both. We'll immediately review that policy, and then we'll set you for a free initial phone consultation where we can discuss all the options that you have. And during that phone call, we'll give you an opinion as to what we think are the chances of getting you approved. So we're available all over the country to represent you, no matter where you live. We've represented claimants in every single state. The process is really easy because we do everything telephonically and through email. In today's world, there's really not a huge necessity for us to meet in person, and while we'd love to meet with all of our clients, it rarely ever happens because it's not efficient, and it doesn't have to be an inconvenience for you as the claimant. We can get everything we need paperless, and Prudential's handling your claim in New Jersey, so no matter where you are in the state, they're remote as well also. So send us a copy of your information, give us a call now. A lawyer will immediately take your call. We'll let you know right away if we can help you. And whether you speak to Stephen or myself, we appreciate the opportunity to discuss your Prudential disability claim with you.